Welcome to Macquarie's Momentum India Conference. This is day 3, and we continue with our Digital Dreams Day in partnership with Praxis Global Alliance. We've had 4 fascinating sessions so far. Now we focus on HealthTech. We have an enthralling panel here with Tata 1mg, Pristyn Care, and Medanta. This session is going to be moderated by Aryaman Tandon, who's from the Praxis Global Alliance. So I'll leave it to you, Aryaman.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Aditya, and welcome, Rajiv, Tarun, Gaurav. Thanks a lot for joining us for this conversation. It's a wonderful year, has been, and also a brilliant year that's 2022 going to be. And healthcare and digital health we've all seen how important and critical it has been in the last 2 years with COVID, and even without, for the coming years, within the future. I would like to let you first talk about a couple of topics, which I wanted to cover in the panel conversation today. We'll of course love to talk about digital health. It's the most favorite topic of everyone. Healthcare businesses, investors, even people, patients, everyone around in the ecosystem. Let's also talk about digital health within the different components of healthcare. Let's talk about the payer ecosystem. Let's talk about the provider ecosystem. Let's talk about all the medtech, diagnostics, and all the ancillary ecosystems around healthcare. I also want to touch upon, some of the topics and niche opportunities within healthcare on the B2B side, even if not only directly on the patient side. Now, let's also talk about, how the new age players and the, so-called traditional but core healthcare players, they're looking at digital health from different vantage points, and at least, and will they all merge into one direction, and how will that evolve going ahead? Of course, we love to talk about the government and the regulations, so love to spend some time on, where can government play a pivotal role. We of course seen them, play a very, very strategic role in the last 2 years in really spearheading ecosystem and the infrastructure growth. And then finally, there's of course, we've seen how health tech, businesses and across internet sectors have surged valuations and lapped up capital in the last 1 year. So, would love to talk about what's driven that, what's driving the valuation, and where do we see the bets of the future. So those are some of the points I want to cover. Of course, if you want to talk about any other points, most happy and most welcome. So let me start off with the most interesting topic, digital health. Rajiv, if I may start with you. And from your perspective, you've looked at technology, you've looked at healthcare, you looked at different aspects of healthcare and technology together. I think would love to understand from you that if you look at India, what kind of route will the digital health ecosystem take? Is it going to be an integrated system with payer provider care, something like what Kaiser did in US? Do we see a digital version of that happening in India? Is it going to be different, tiers of digital healthcare? Is it going to be integrated, or is it still going to be unbundled? Right? And how do you think this whole space will evolve, right, in the next 5 to 7 years?
Sure. So very interesting, and I think this one particular question can have multiple discussions for hours and hours. But what I see currently is that there is a major challenge with respect to adoption of basic HIS or EMR in healthcare ecosystems in across hospitals. Folks may be having HIS or EMR, but most of the time it is catering to purely inventory management, billing, and associated process, and some simple stuff like report publishings and diagnostics and lab both included. So that's what, and this challenge is there in most of the countries. In Western countries, obviously, roughly 2 decades back, they have come out of this stage. So what I foresee is that there will be a bit of challenge in adoptions of various forms of HIS to EMR, you may want to call whatever, but that challenge is going to be there. But at the same time, there are few hospitals who have realized that the system of record is very much required, not purely for billing or inventory management perspective, but also in a longer term, it will reduce medicational errors, diagnostic errors, and will eventually be, help in patient clinical outcomes. At the same time, there are a lot of hospitals who are moving beyond EMR. I'm deliberately using the term called beyond EMR, which is nothing beyond the system of records. Let me share, how AI or ML or VR virtual reality. So these have nothing to do with HIS or AMR, because HIS and AMR is not capturing each and every information which is required for AI to work or ML to work. So which means that these systems are also coming into ecosystems and they are working in parallel. So for some time, beyond EMR and AMR will coexist, and they will eventually drift towards beyond AMR. People will start adopting AMR, and life will go to beyond AMR because there are a lot of advantages, and we'll talk about them. And you're now talking about how the complete landscape with respect to country will evolve. I think when you look into the NDHM part, which government have launched, I have very very high hopes with that. Simple reason is that government is very clear. There are 6 building blocks which are already being there. Sandbox testing have started. They realize that in the value chain, right from the primary healthcare to tertiary care to diagnostic labs to pharmacists, have to be integrated so that patient information is available irrespective of where he or she get treated first. And according to me, 5 years back, if you look into, or 10 years back, when you were talking about in the mobile world, the number portability, before that, we were all captive of a particular service provider. We can't think about changing the phone number. And that was like a nightmare. Now with this mobile portability, life has become so easy that, and I think this NDHM will ensure that there is a service provider portability. I will not be captive of Medantas of the world. I will not be captive of a particular lab of the world. I'll be, service or provider importable. So that's what is the future I foresee going to happen in next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, if I think I completely agree with Rajiv, and just to build on to what he just mentioned, I think Universal Health ID, which Rajiv just spoke about, an initiative by NDMH, basically Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, which got launched I think last year, is basically with an aim to develop this integrated digital health infrastructure, so that any individual will have that universal ID, and he can access and maintain the health record irrespective of the institutions he go to, whether it is government or private. And between private, it could be various levels of care, starting from primary care to diagnostics to tertiary care across institutions. And with, more importantly, I think with insurance penetration growing day by day, this digital health record will also become an sense, not only the convenience, because otherwise it is humanly not possible for any insurance company to keep a track of previous health records of any patient, right? In addition, I think credible means of spreading the disease and let's say wellness awareness, and personalized algorithms, which can come through integrated non-invasive monitoring devices, would be a key for better care going forward.
So thanks a lot, Tarun and Rajiv. I think very helpful. Gaurav, if I ask you this question again from a different angle, the kind of scale at which 1mg deals with customers and patients, right? With the whole, pharmacy, with the whole diagnostics, teleconsultation, you've also started setting up your own labs. If I look at it more from the patient standpoint, right? How are you seeing what's the need of digital health? Like, what do patients want? What's the right patient-centric model for future? And do you think there's going to be one model, or do you think there are going to be many models? Is there opportunity for a full stack digital player, within India, or you will still see some facets remaining, non-digital or at least offline? And we've seen what VDoc has done in China, right? They've created a massive digital health ecosystem, integrated everything which existed within healthcare, and literally like decouple the asset from the service, right? And do you see a lot of that happening in India? When is the right time? Will it ever happen? Those are some of the questions I want to ask you.
It's a great question. Actually, there's so many questions layered into one question. I don't even know if I can attempt to answer. I'm sure I'll miss. But look, if you just step back, I think we have to understand that healthcare itself is just very, very broad. We typically talk about healthcare, but healthcare is primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary healthcare is a lot about actually convenience, ease of access, to some extent affordability, standardization of services, quick triage, quick identification of the patient's problems. Tertiary is where we get into more and more asset investment, asset class. You need to get to, let's say, a hospital like Medanta, which offers the best quality tertiary care in certain facilities, etc. Right now, all of this, the holy grail is to bring everything together, right? And to bring everything together so that your data is digitized in one place, and doctors, whether at Medanta or providing digital health services on 1MG's console, or your corporates, 24/7 doctor line can basically give you the right advice. The challenge is that it's actually very hard to bring all this data together in the way and shape the ecosystem exists, right? Which is where I was hearing my colleagues, and which is what NDHM is trying to do, right? Which is it's saying that there are multiple data providers or data producers, and then there's a brokerage sort of a thing which brings all this data together in one place, regardless of how you're storing it and how you're securing it. But basically, it can all come together, and there are sort of these entities on top of it which can start to provide interesting insights as well. Now, what China has done, and of course, China does everything at a very different scale because they're able to sort of bring the public-private, investments together and create entities like VDoc or Ping An Good Doctor, right? You name it, and India is different. We have the benefits of, let's say, democracy, etc. Slower maybe, but we are getting there. The government's done a great job with, for instance, finance and UPI, right? Bringing all your accounts together and making them seamless. And I think the attempt is to try and do the same thing with healthcare. Is it needed? Absolutely. If you look at it, India probably provides one of the best tertiary care and one of the worst, primary care systems across. In terms of, and again, if you live in Delhi, primary care is probably great, but the moment you are in tertiary care is great as well. But the moment you step out, so India suffers from access and quality, right? Where consistency is a challenge, and it is absolutely critical to bring these together, right? And NDHM, etc., as they maybe mature from tertiary care payments to maybe creating universal insurance for primary care, I think are the right models to bring these together. I feel the big challenge that exists in India, which is why some of these don't come together, is the lack of like a universal payer of some sort. And wherever payers exist, whether it's insurance, whether it's corporate, whether it's the government, a lot of these optimizations are easier to happen and bring together because the incentives can get better aligned. Hopefully, we'll get to that point sometime soon.
Well, thanks a lot, Gaurav. That's pretty insightful. And Tarun, I'll just come back to you. With let me ask one more question on this. So Rajiv and Gaurav both. So you spoke about OPD and primary care, right? And we've seen that teleconsultations has really picked up. During COVID, it's probably 10x of or 10 to 12x of where it was pre-COVID. Can it really be profitable? That's one question. And second is, what about the offline OPD model, right? We've seen a couple of players who tried to create, an OPD and a primary care clinic chain, etc. I mean, maybe not now, but let's say 3 to 5 years from now, what do you think? When would these models become sustainable?
So, shall I?
Yeah, sure, Rajiv. Yeah.
Sure. So, you said it right. From the pre-COVID era to first half of COVID, which is like till September of last year, our telemedicine volume jumps to roughly 11 times or more than 11 times. So it's a huge jump. Honestly, before COVID, our telemedicine or video consults, video stroke teleconsults, which are like phone consults and chat consults, were at a discounted rate than the in-person consult. And then we realized that you know there are too many such requests, so we moved the price to the same as in-person consult. So which means that whether you come in person or you do video consult, price will be same. Definitely telephony and chat are at very subsidized rate. Those are for chronic patients. So now in this particular case we saw no differences, but there are few interesting trends since you asked. I think there were four myths which got busted when we published a paper. It's a published paper in the public domain. Uh, that we were of the opinion that this is a young people phenomena. We were of the opinion that this is a city phenomena. We were of the opinion that new patients will not come. Only captive or old patient will come. So this was the third myth. Fourth myth was that uh, chronic patients. We can't come to the video consult, they have to be there in person. and only typical diabetic management, internal management, all those patients will come. All the four myth got busted heavily in the favor of more than 50%. More than 55% people were of 55 year and above. More than 45% of the people were coming from three states: UP, Jharkhand, and Bihar. We all know that these are traditionally known as not so digital savvy states. We were, onco, neuro were the patient who were constituting, out of 30 odd specialties we have in Medanta, were constituting more than 40% of the patient. So all of these, and we registered more than 4 lakh patient in 1 year, 4 lakh new patients. And our typical run rate of registering new patient is less than 1 lakh in any year before COVID. So just imagine that, this phenomena is going to stay, because it was ensuring that it's a freedom of time both for clinician as well as for patient, and why your care should be a function of the place where you stay. We did consults for more than 89 country patient. We did consults for 28 states and 8 union territories, one UT and one state. No patient came in that 1 year. I don't know why, but this is some stat I thought I'll share with you. And this is bound to stay, bound to stay.
And what about you, Gaurav? From, I think your maybe you'll have a very different view. I would love to hear that as well. But yeah, over to you.
Yeah, no, look, I think Rajiv shared some very good stats, and I think our view of the challenge of the OPD market, especially outside of tertiary care centers like Medanta, where you have really high quality specialties and people are going to talk to an oncologist or let's say a neurologist, etc.
Yeah.
The key problem is that it's not easy to price the services of an outpatient consult guy. And we have to understand majority of Indian market is still self-medication, right? I have a problem, instead of going to talk to a doctor, I'll go to my pharmacist and say, yeah, peet mein dard ho raha hai, kuch dawai de do, right? So some sort of that. So what we have seen is that a lot of that behavior is starting to shift to, let's say, talking to a doctor, and primarily because of price arbitrage still. Though, to be honest, what people used to complain about 2-3 years ago to pay even 99 rupees for a doctor, they are now comfortable paying 500 rupees for a doctor, right? There's still in a customer's mind, there is still a pricing issue that the doctor is not touching me, feeling me, taking my pulse, right? How do you justify 1,000 rupee or 2,000 rupee OPD? It has changed to a large extent for specialists, because those are fundamentally very hard to get, very inconvenient, require a really long wait time, right? If you go to any tertiary care facility, meeting a doctor is like a 4 or 5 hour affair, right? And telemedicine actually is a real game changer there.
Yeah.
When it comes to more primary care side, I think the benefits are muted, and which is where, again, as I said, if a payer comes in, it actually starts to just increase the pie drastically, which I think NDHM is again trying to do through its unified health interface, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Gordon. I don't know if you got a chance, and Rajiv and Tarun, to see, we did a big Praxis did a big report on OPD as well, right? I mean, it's a $20 to $22 billion market, right, in India, and I mean, there is and if you look at the number of consultations, like we do about 3 per capita, that's the Indian, it's very underpenetrated compared to the world globally, right? So that's why I think a massive. And what we also feel is, if you look at e-commerce, etc., with COVID, even without that, over the past 7 to 8 years, there's been a lot of behavioral change of customers, right? And it's taken a certain amount of time for them to realize the benefit, not actually going out, buying and saving that time. And now actually e-commerce prices are not the best, right? They're not better than offline. So there's again parity, but people still choose e-commerce, right? So that will happen, but you feel it will happen with certain time when the adoption and behavioral change happens. So, Tarun, coming back to you, I have 2 questions for you. One is, you are, of course, Pristyn is creating a phenomenal growth story on the whole secondary care and the surgery space, right? I have 2 questions for you. A, how are you seeing the whole behavioral change of customer? Teleconsultation is still like, I mean, you can do it online. There's no risk. There's no sort of, there's no invasion, etc. All of it. But when you talk about surgeries, etc., right? It's a complex process and it's risky, right? And it needs specialist care. It needs surgeon. You need a OT, etc. All of it. So, how are you seeing patient behavior change and comfort with online, right? A, comfort with online, and B, also, just working in terms of their needs, their openness to take care and go to doctors and sort of discover the issues, etc. How are you seeing that change? And the second question is, of course, and this is a slightly tricky question, Gaurav, I'll ask you that as well. I mean, with the whole huge surge of capital that health tech businesses are seeing, right? Of course, there is going to be pressures to scale, right? Now, how do healthcare businesses create the right balance between doing what's necessary, versus scaling? And healthcare is a very sensitive area, right? I mean, you should, and surgery is generally the last resort. And I'm sure you're taking enough sort of protocols internally, etc., to take care of that, but I think a fine line needs to be balanced between scale and delivering the service that a patient actually needs, right? So how should businesses think about that? I think those are two questions. Tarun, over to you.
Yeah. So, Aryaman, answering to your first question, most of our consults, over 90% of our consults are physical consults only. Uh, but in the second wave of COVID was very unique, wherein it changed the mindset of even surgeons and the patients altogether. That patients were ready to show their reports over a video consult, and also show over a video consult to the doctor. Although once the patient has agreed for a surgical intervention, surgeon always needs to see the patient physically, before shifting the patient to AOT. That's what the protocol, we decided on when we were doing the, video consult. But as far as patient behavior is concerned, when, we were doing 50-60% of our consults online, we still need to educate the patient on what is the actual diagnosis, prognosis, right? And what all we are doing in a physical consult. Surgeons were given a training on how to take the patient through and explain the disease, or various diagrams were made for doctors to take the patient through over the video consult module, so that the patient is educated, right? And most of the secondary care which we take care of is not something that patient has just been diagnosed with. Patient is suffering from that disease of, let's say, gallstones or piles, etc., for over a long time, wherein finally he has decided, and over second or third opinion, he wanted to go ahead for a surgery. So he's fairly clear that many people have already suggested in the surgery. It's just that he needs to be educated that it can lead to a tertiary level intervention. So secondary care is appropriate for him, right? And answering to your second question, which was more of a capital. Can you repeat your question, Arjun?
Yeah, no,
On
so what I
capital.
want to understand, Tarun, is there is, of course, a lot of, I mean, there is a lot of capital that's being deployed in health tech businesses. And with that, of course, there is going to be pressure to scale, right? You just need to scale the business. And I mean, if you talk about Pristyn, etc., it's a very tricky business, right? I mean, it's not easy to just scale, because you need to deliver a service when it's actually needed, right? So it's a lot about market share gain. I mean, both, because there is a lot of untreated population, but there is also a sort of population which can migrate to Pristyn, and sort of with the whole digital and the better reliable service. But communicating that is tricky, right? Because we've seen how one or two incidents in India can really create waves, and just a lot of that happens. So how should, and I'm not talking about Pristyn, but how should health tech businesses generally think about this, right? Because it's a sensitive topic, right? Health is it's basically profit with responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
it needs to be not profiteering, but actually creating profits. So, just how do you guys think about it? How should health tech businesses think about it? I don't know if there's an answer to it, also, by the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are very clear, and we all need to understand, this thing that, we are moving towards, let's say, preventive healthcare, right? Now, preventive healthcare, one can ask question that, why shall I go for a health check? Now it is required for, so that you can take action before even the diseases come to you, because your vitals are have started indicating that you are having, going to have this disease. Now, taking the same argument a step ahead, secondary care, if someone is not taking action on, will create a need for a tertiary intervention, an emergency kind of a procedure. Let's say, to be very specific, someone is having gallstones over a long period of time, and there is a 5% probability that that gets converted into gallbladder cancer, right? So likewise, it is absolutely ethical and absolutely medically correct that someone, if needs a secondary care, should be provided. This is number one. So there is nothing wrong. And then you need to have very set protocols in terms of what are the diagnoses needed in case of a particular disease, in case you need to have a clinical examination by a surgeon to decide that yes, this has lead to let's say a stage 2 or stage 3 piles, let's say, for example, which cannot be treated by medicines. So it requires a surgery. So that has been followed, and that has been checked thoroughly by the medical directorate. SOPs being made internally to keep a check on compliances.
Thanks a lot, Tarun. I think that's pretty helpful. Rajiv, if I move back to you, I want to talk about insurance. And I mean, if we look at India, it's a very it's a very dumbbell kind of market, right? You have the upper end, which is very well insured with all the private insurers, and then you have the bottom 50% where government has done a phenomenal job, right, with multiple insurance schemes and Ayushman Bharat and all of that. Of course, with its own set of payment cycles and all of that, which has created some pressure. But I mean, OPD, for example, is not covered, right? It's very underpenetrated right now. All right, wellness, preventive health, etc., all of it generally not covered, right? And you've seen that. I mean, we've seen in US where insurance can really create integrated models, where the payer sort of works together. We've not seen that in India because the provider ecosystem is also fragmented, and payer ecosystem is also multi-player. How can insurance play a better role, right? And let's talk about all, right? Let's talk about private as well as government, right? And there is an opportunity, right? I mean, we've seen how in other countries insurance has really changed the game of healthcare, made preventive health, and it is one big lever which can actually make preventive health and wellness, right, a big focus for patients as well. If they because I know in Kaiser, for example, they used to have this kind of thing where you do the regular health checkups, right? You go all of that, and even if you have something, there is going to be a big discount, right, on your premiums, etc. They incentivize and work with you closely to either follow a better health or even monitor your health, right, so that you're able to predict outcomes and predict concerns much earlier. So, what do you think should be the role of insurance? We've not seen a lot of innovation happen there, as yet. In the next 3 to 5 years, over to you, Rajiv.
Sure. So I think you in the questions you have answered many stuff, but let me take something additional. See, what's happening is that you rightly said that innovation has not happened in the insurance, and also uh, there are multiple facets. One is the product design, other is a delivery, third is the reclaim. How do you communicate? So all the facets are very very poor. You in last so many years, how many innovative healthcare products have been launched by insurance companies? I think nil. Okay. So the other reason is that their communication is also very poor. They have not been able to communicate the advantages, and sometimes there are so many terms and conditions uh, which are difficult for somebody to absorb, which means the patient to absorb. So what's happening is that folks don't have any faith in the insurance product. It's not about just the money part. I'm not talking as a hospital administrator. I'm just talking as a uh, patient or a beneficiary of the insurance system. So I think first thing which insurance company has to come out with a product which is easy to understand. Communication is very important in this country. Okay, you know we all know that how political statements are done in a rally, and that swings the whole mood. So same way, but at the same time, what we have seen is that in last 2 years, uh, especially during the last 18 months and so, we have seen more and more insurance patients coming to at least in a hospital like Medanta, which is a good sign. I'm talking of private hospitals, and we'll talk about Ayushman a bit later. And at the same time, see what's happening is that you touch. I've been a beneficiary of Kaiser, for roughly 4 or 5 years when I was in California. I'm talking early 90s, and that time when they used to force me for preventive healthcare, I used to crib. I'm healthy and hearty. I'm talking about 25 years back. So, but now I realize that what is the important, and if everybody goes for, as rightly said by Tarun, go for OPD, more and more OPD, and more preventive health. Probably there is no need for, secondary or tertiary care hospital, unless it's a dire ER. So I think not just the private players, but the regulatory bodies, including government. Government has done their bit of bringing 50% of the population into Ayushman. Those are their other challenges. But at the same time, framework from the government side is in place. But I think regulatory body, including government, have to push on more and more insurance and more OPD and preventive healthcare. Because if we have OPD and preventive healthcare in place, probably hospitalization will not occur. And in any case, we are always short of beds in terms of bed versus patient ratio. So that's my view with respect to insurance.
Yeah, and also maybe the whole I mean, again, government has done a brilliant job with Ayushman Bharat and all the other health insurance schemes, but I think the whole payment cycles and timelines has generally been an issue, right, for hospitals. I mean, I know that a couple of health tech businesses, they're thinking of creating fintech plays with that whole opportunity. That can they actually create a working capital, and the surgery and procedure has been done, it will come. So if this, because fintech has so much money, right? They need areas to sort of deploy that working capital. So maybe it's creating its opportunities in its own way. No, that's Gaurav. What about you? I think you're also I know 1MG is very integrated across overall healthcare, right? Both pharmacy, diagnostics, consultation. I don't know what you are thinking about secondary care. I don't want to ask you that, but for you, let's say a digital provider, I still do you think there's going to be a time where I can go on 1MG or anyone else for that matter. My insurance is also there, and like everything is taken care of on that platform, right? Why can't it be coupled to it?
Yeah, that's a sore spot actually. And I don't know how many of you remember Max Bupa coming out with its outpatient insurance policy maybe 5 years back.
Yeah.
We were the first partners, and we have for long believed that actually, if you want India's healthcare ecosystem to improve, you have to push more and more of the burden towards primary care and less towards tertiary. And actually, if you look at the healthcare ecosystem in India, the biggest problem is that uh, the patient goes from being hale and hearty to actually landing up on a hospital bed very, very quickly, right? There's really very little intervention that happens in between. It happens for very few people. It doesn't happen frequently enough, right? And the force that can actually provide that intervention, right? If you look at the world over, what Kaiser does is that it basically provides that intervention, right? It says that, hey, here's a pool of money. If you have good behavior, I will actually give this money back to you. Switzerland does the same thing. In fact, Europe has this massive chronic care program where they incentivize people to go for their diabetes checks 4 times a year, right? And if you go and if you get tested, over time they reduce the number of times you have to go, and there's an incentive every time you go if you stay well. So we are big believers in that philosophy, and we've actually put our money where our mouth is by actually partnering with ICICI with their OPD policy and Max Bupa. I think it just hasn't taken off. And the reason it hasn't taken off is that OPD is not an independent stream of revenue, right? OPD is a stream that actually reduces your inpatient expenditure, because think of it today, an insurance company talks to a patient first when he's buying the policy, second when he's actually claiming a hospital bill, right? There's really no interaction in between, right? And our view is that if these interactions in between can increase, then eventually you can delay or prevent hospitalization, right? So outpatient is essentially a tool to reduce a patient's hospitalization and hospitalization spend, not really an additional stream of revenue. And I think this is something that no one's been able to figure out, because there's not enough money in and of itself in the hospitalization stream, right? Because India's insurance sector is fairly stressed in terms of premiums and the claims. So everyone looks at OPD as an additional revenue stream, which is where it doesn't take off, right? Because a consumer doesn't want to pay an extra 5,000 rupees a year or 2,000 rupees a year to actually buy OPD insurance now, right? So that's on top of that, you add the problem that the whole ecosystem is non-digital, right? You go to a pharmacy, the cost of actually submitting bills, getting reimbursed, actually is a huge deterrent for both the insurance company and also the consumer, right? So it's like a recipe for disaster. But that said, all signs are that things are moving in that direction. We are seeing an increasing number of benefits players, corporate benefits players, etc., which are bundling in insurance and benefits for consumers to use, right? It's a little short of OPD insurance, but it's definitely trending in that direction. And going back to one of the biggest advantages of uh, huge spend in digital healthcare is the fact that someone will probably take a stab at this problem.
Got it. No, very helpful, Gaurav. And do you also feel, just one small question to close this topic, but given you mentioned no one is really creating that digital ecosystem standardization with pharmacies, clinics, hospitals. I mean, we've seen offline TPAs, etc., but they're mostly working on
reimbursement.
Correct. Is there an opportunity for a digitally first player to come and be that layer and just create this ecosystem? Do you think someone is just going to come and do it?
No, we are doing it. We are working with a lot of providers. In fact, with a couple of insurance providers, we are now plugging directly into their benefits engine. So we are integrating our transaction benefits, like services layer, into their benefits engine and kind of figuring out what they are eligible for, what customers are eligible for, and making it a full cashless pay module. So we are doing that. It's just that the pace of progress is very, very slow.
No, this is great. This is very helpful, Rajiv, Gaurav. Tarun, I want to come back to you. I have a slightly very different question, not related to, related to healthcare, but probably that's related to the whole tech ecosystem in India. We've seen 2021 to be, and late 20 to be a crazy year, right? It's been a bumper year. So many unicorns have been created. Massive amount of capital has been infused into businesses. What has driven this? And my question is, there has been a surge in valuation of companies, right? Two questions: what has driven it, and what has been the thesis? Is it that is it is it revenue expansion? Is it multiple growth? Is it margin expansion that has driven the valuations? Is it that there's going to be massive inorganic activity in the coming year? There's a lot of talk that, hey, this is a bubble, this is going to burst in 2022, etc. No, we don't think that is. We think there's massive technology opportunity in India. But what has driven this surge in it can not be only the scale up growth, right? I mean, the growth has been there throughout the past 10 years, right? But the valuations have really skyrocketed. We've seen companies at 100 and within the 6 months go and do a unicorn, $2 billion round, etc. All of it. What do you, just over to you, Tarun, on that one?
Yeah, I think good question, Aryaman. I think this is a lot to do with change in consumer behavior, right? They always need that service or product, whether it is a healthcare service or they would need any kind of product. It is just that the behavior of more and more convenience, more and more accessibility, maybe 24/7 accessibility of that service or that product on the fingertips is driving this growth. And we in India at this particular time are maybe the blessed ones to have this opportunity that COVID in a way is a blessing in disguise. Forced us to create this opportunity, and people, whether it is in edtech, fintech, or medtech, have well encashed, and ultimately even post COVID era, people are getting benefited through that. So I think it is patient convenience, patient experience, or consumer experience per se, and it is a sustainable model which will go forward from here. It is not going to bubble down from here.
Got it. Rajiv, I'll come to you after this, but Gaurav, if I ask you the same question, of course, you have a slightly different story with Tata, etc., all of it, but and I'm sure that's going fantastic. But you must have seen all the other. Is it? I mean, do you think there's going to be a lot of inorganic next year? Do you think there's going to be consolidation? Will the Series ABC kind of companies dry up for capital, not scale? What's the rally? What's the source of this rally?
Yeah, look again. It's hard to predict as having been in the startup ecosystem for the last 8 years, we've seen our ups and downs. This year is a little crazy, but I think there are two sort of secular trends, right? One is that COVID drove massive behavior change, right? You basically said, hey, world, 2 years, you're going to be shut down. You can only access services online. And every service which was online basically went massively up, whether it is digital health, whether it is edtech, right? We all took, like, there were months we spent zero on marketing and we grew like 20%, right? Months. And as a result, what happened was that all the businesses which were supposed to be affected actually did really, really well, right? So one is that COVID, hand of God, drove massive consumer behavior change, something that probably billions of dollars of marketing could not have done on its own in the contracted time frame that it did, right? So that I think that's one thing that has happened. So the businesses are bigger, maybe healthier. I think the second thing that's happened, and we can't deny that, is that there's just a lot of cheap capital available. China is maybe, for whatever all said and done, it's not available as an opportunity because of the crackdown on the internet economy.
Yeah.
And India is one of the biggest, after the US, maybe the biggest game in town. And so where do you put money? And whether this is going to continue, I'm guessing it would, because I don't see China, opening up anytime soon, given their crackdown and all. But it's also good to realize that while the market has changed and changed for the better, it's not where we expect it to be. So I would think that at some point maybe there'll be some correction, but at the same time I would also say that Indian companies today are much better than we've ever been. The market is deeper than it has ever been. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the market was not as deep; it was shallow. I think the opportunities abound if you count the number of companies that are really at-scale companies, serving hundreds of thousands of consumers every month. So it's just in a virtuous cycle, creating an ecosystem. I think the appetite to do inorganic consolidations has also gone up because companies are well capitalized. So sort of like a virtuous cycle, which is probably just kicking off now and will stay in momentum for some time to come.
Got it. No, that's great to hear. I have my own story, Gaurav. Maybe we can chat offline, but
We
it's
should.
great views on this. Yeah, it's a constant topic of discussion. Rajiv, if I move to you, back to the core sort of healthcare, and away from the whole private equity frenzy. But I want to talk a little bit about regulations. And you've been in this space for such a long time. Where do you think, of course, government has done a phenomenal job. It has done a lot of innovation in the last sort of 2 3 years. What else is left? We spoke about the whole insurance thing. That is one piece. But just to enable digital businesses, I'll just go on mute quickly as some fire alarm mock. But what else is left for government to do? In the whole regulations and standardization area.
Sure. So I think, when COVID happened, and before that, for roughly a decade or so, everybody was figuring it out how telemedicine will perform in the country. And suddenly, all rules were very clear, and we were able to address the growing need uh, of the patients during that stress time. So this is one part. And if you look into basic principles or 6 blocks of NDHM, we talked about that also. A universal ID, which will ensure that patient information, longevity of record. If you look into the facility registration, which is very good, uh, people don't know what kind of services are available with a particular hospital or clinics, and more so in a rural area. With that also, things are going to come. So all of government has given a framework. Now hospitals have to register themselves and get this implementation going on. Third thing, which is definitely bound to happen now with the fundamentally we are assuming that in the healthcare, care will move away from the hospital. What we are saying is that it is impossible, for any infrastructure to accommodate those many sick patients in at any given day. So, and we have seen the show somewhere in the second wave. So what government have to do is that have to come out with a mechanism by which this remote care, regulations will become more stronger. I'll give you some examples, and I think government is very clear. Telemedicine is working and it's fantastic, and it is bound to stay. But what is the next level of experience? Next level of experience will be on the wearable devices, which means that patient and doctor are getting connected. Doctor is not interested in knowing that how you have taken your BP or sugar level. Even when you come to the clinic, doctor asks you, you have written, in a chit sheet, you show to the doctor, doctor agrees. But where the doctor needs that experience is that when he's using a stethoscope, when he is, looking into the ear using the camera, when looking into the skin for a typical skin disease, a dermatologist. So in this kind of scenarios, what we need is that implementation and rollout of this devices which are useful for the doctor to ensure the care is given. I think these are some of the regulations which are not very clear, but at the same time, private players are coming into picture, and eventually, whatever is the general practice will fall into the regulation part. Last thing which, according to me, should happen is that, see, eventually, when you talk about primary care to a tertiary care, this opt-out business which we have as part of the NDHM side, there are few regulations where government has to look into, not just from a, see, government is trying to do a balance between adoption and misuse. Okay, at the same time, what we are saying is that how do we prevent misuse of this by insurance player? At the same time, some of the insurance players are saying that if somebody is not, like a example which we took, 4-time diabetic, everything is okay, next time your premium is going to be reduced. But at the same time, if you are still, your diabetic values are increasing over quarter and quarter, are premium going to get impacted? So that's a balance which nobody is taking a call right now. So some of these stuff have to be taken very, very holistic fashion, and government and regulators have to play a balancing role between so-called adoption and misuse. That's, according to me, should be the role of the government.
No, thanks a lot, Rajiv, and Gaurav, Tarun, Rajiv, all three. Thank you so much, for close to the end time. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I'd like to pass the baton back to Aditya. Thanks a lot for inviting me, and back to you.
Thank you, Aryaman, for kind of hosting the session. I just had two questions, if I may, for the panel. So maybe starting with you, Gaurav. So I guess the whole piece about omni-channel retail, right? So obviously the chronic side is more kind of geared towards what you've been doing, but as you're looking at acute, I guess could you just speak about kind of omni-channel retail? You started kind of first physical store as well recently. So as you're kind of looking to kind of grow that side, are you looking at franchisees building it by yourself? How are you looking at that entire competitive landscape?
I can't talk much about what we're planning to do, but we've actually had physical stores for a long time. In fact, Medanta was where we started our first physical stores, as Mr. Rajiv would know and remember. Today, we run physical stores in Fortis hospitals as well. And our view of omnichannel is very simple: that customers should be able to access healthcare regardless of the channel that they are in. Chronic customers have specific needs. Maybe they can plan better. Non-chronic acute patients have different needs. Even chronic patients, in case of emergencies, running out of supplies last minute, they may need urgent deliveries, etc. Different channels meet different consumer needs, and so our goal is to be in whatever channel the consumer needs to access healthcare services in a reliable and high quality fashion. So it's omni-channel, it's physical, it's online, it may be some new channel in the future as well.
Thanks, Gaurav. We probably have another 2 more minutes, so just a few additional questions would be like, how do you, maybe more for Rajiv and Tarun, right? So how are you looking at the overall international opportunity? So the last panel which we had was on SaaS, and that's all about kind of building in India for the world, right? So is there an international market opportunity which you guys are looking at as well?
So definitely yes. And if you look into most of the tertiary care hospitals like Medanta, they have always have international patients. But what we realize is that they were coming definitely for a particular procedure or a surgery, and after that they were at their own. But in last this 18 months, as I said, that there are patients from 89 countries who did constant OPD consults, which are post-discharge follow-up, as we say it, on a regular basis. So I think with a mix of, as Gaurav also said, that it's a hybrid model which is going to play now, and that's what Tarun also mentioned. They do in-person consult before the surgery happens, and then after that, post discharge consult can always happen in a mixed hybrid model, and that's going to continue to go play. Right now, there are major challenges with respect to patients not coming to the country because of the COVID pandemic, and elective surgeries are definitely delayed. But what we have seen in the recent past, especially in last 3-4 months, there are definitely patients who are there for critical surgeries more on the onco side, neuro side, and cardiac side.
Yeah. So Aditya, MVT, we have a little different opinion because we do secondary care, and honestly, as far as secondary care, like Rajiv mentioned, it is different from critical care that patient needs to actually travel from the countries to India for that. But for us, whenever we go, MVT, we will launch that country which has similar, Indian patients' behavior with similar kind of regulatory environment that we will go there and extend our USPs for elective surgeries in the country, but not MVT. Yeah.
So we have another question from the audience here. Let me just read this out. So, any views on the requirement of financial services apart from insurance via the healthcare platforms? Maybe Gaurav, yourself first.
Use of financial services by healthcare platforms.
Apart from insurance.
No, yeah, look, there are a lot. Anything that has to do with, and I would think that anything related to secondary or tertiary is a prime candidate for financial services. Maybe a better question to ask Tarun and Rajiv. But yeah, there is a lot of need for financial services other than insurance and healthcare.
Yeah, so I think capital investment would be definitely needed, this financial support across the complete value chain, like we discussed in the primary, secondary, tertiary, critical care, and so mostly covering from infrastructure. We still need a lot of investment in infrastructure to patient acquisition and also patient retention, because the way we track patient vitals continuously will enable any enterprise to retain the patient. So we need investment there. Also, during the session we discussed on advanced, diagnostics, which will become more prevalent going forward. I think Rajiv mentioned on, mobile vans or mobile ambulances, which would be the need of our as we deeply penetrate the primary care or immediate provision of services at the doorstep of the patient, right? So we need investment there, which will have better clinical outcomes.
Rajiv, any thoughts on that?
I think in a hospital like Medanta, there, and in a country where penetration is very low compared to most of the advanced countries, and if a patient comes and he's not in a position to get easy funds, when I say easy means faster funds from normal banking, then some of these players are there, and they definitely have certain presence in Medanta where there is a relationship. So what we do is that we bring the patient and the provider to the same table, and that's our role. Apart from that, there is nothing else in which Medanta is involved. But we've seen some traction in that space also happening, but obviously because the risk is high, so which means that premium is high with respect to the interest and the payouts. So that's a challenge which is there. But at the same time, when it comes to health, and that to critical care health versus the premium part, a lot of people opt for care at a premium. So that's what we have seen. But that's the private payer, not much strong presence, but they are definitely there in pockets.
And as you kind of end the session, maybe just one final question. We maybe start with Tarun. What are the top two metrics that you're following right now as you're looking to scale, and maybe just on a 3-year basis?
I think one is, we are into elective surgeries. So one straight metric is, what's the number of surgeries on the board, and what is the month-on-month growth or year-on-year growth that we are uh, able to achieve. And second most important thing is customer acquisition cost, which is important because with a lot of competes coming in, and everyone is fighting for the same pie in digital marketing. The cost can go haywire. second important piece to keep our contribution margin is in control by keeping a close look at customer acquisition cost.
Rajiv?
Sure. For me, I think it is how do I make sure that, see, in terms of clinical epitome, we are probably very good. But at the same time, we know that we are not at the same level in terms of a service excellence part, which is a softer aspect of a relationship or interaction with the patient. So what we want to do is that we want to measure quantifiably, it's difficult to measure empathy, but at the same time, some intervention can be done on service excellence where each and every interaction, whether in the digital world or in person, is done whenever patient interacts with hospital. We try to bring some digital intervention, because when you talk about a scale, it is humanly impossible to put those numbers of people to ensure the service excellence is there. So how do you match it with digital experience? Same ATM experience, whether a guy with a t-shirt or a suit goes for 100 rupees or 10,000 rupees, ATM behaves the same way. So that's the beauty of digital intervention we want to bring to the healthcare in Medanta, that patient gets the same experience.
Gaurav, yourself?
For us, it's top line and service quality. It keeps changing from time to time, but right now it's top line and service quality. Top line always, but service quality is extremely important.
Fantastic. Gaurav, Rajiv, and Tarun, thank you so much for your time on and coming on this Macquarie India conference. And to our participants, up next is a panel on B2B e-commerce, so stick around. But for now, thank you.
Thank you so much.